What's up guys, you're watching Life by TCG. Got a new type of video for you today. This is on the game Flesh and Blood. So if you're a regular subscriber, you probably signed up for my Magic the Gathering videos. No Magic here today, just this new game. Well, not that new anymore, but new to me. I just played this as in Flesh and Blood for the first time in June. That was just like a sealed league using the cards from this Outsiders set. Apart from that, I haven't touched the game. I've been too busy, but recently I got into it just with the hype surrounding Worlds, which has just finished this weekend. So I thought I'd try my hand at like building a deck and playing it online just for fun. I don't own any cards on paper apart from like those random scraps from Outsiders and like the Benji Blitz deck, which is what I played in that sealed league at my LGS. So the hero that I'm working with, the deck that I decided to build for myself, is this Teklovossen. So Teklovossen is definitely seen as one of the like worst overall heroes. If we go into this meta results tab on this Fabricate website, and this is a really sick website by the way. It like has a lot of tools for deck building, and you can see if we scroll down to find the Teklovossen, the hero that I'm playing with, he has like an unfavored matchup into everything, according to the data from this website Talishar, which where the win rates come from. So he's really probably seen as one of the weakest heroes in the game, and that's fine. Like I'm not trying to win all the tournaments. I'm just like slowly wanting to play against different decks and figure out how the game works. But I think I have like a pretty good idea of how to build it from what I've been playing. If we go back to my own deck that I was using, and we go results, then it will pull my own data from the Talishar website, which is like the free online client where you can play matches. And that's why this website is so good. It has like the integration with that. So you build your deck on this website, then you click this button, play on Talishar, and it just you have to make an account first, but you just open up a game and play immediately, and it's pretty quick to get a match. And you know, it's like the free apps for Magic. Like if you play Magic on like Cockatrice or Workstation or like any of those against random people, you expect that the competition isn't very good. Whereas when you play on like leagues on Magic Online, for example, where you're playing for real money basically, then you can expect the competition is much better. But like even then, on the stats that we looked at from the Teklovossen from the Talishar platform, he had like sub 50% win rate into everything that's not the mirror, and you can see that I have like actual 50% win rate. So while that's not anything to write home about, like if you're trying to argue what deck you should bring to your next tournament, like it's still probably not this one. But you know, at least I'm outperforming. I don't have a very big sample size either, but you know, at least I'm outperforming the field a bit. So that's nice. So starting from there, we should talk about the actual cards that I'm playing. So in Flesh and Blood, I'm not going to explain how the game works to all of my newer viewers. I'm sure there's lots of good resources out there to learn that if you want to try to pick it up from Magic. But the equipment, I'm using the Teklo base equipments. So you need those for all your Evos. You have to play the base equipment. So you either got to play these ones, the Teklo ones, the Proto ones, or the Cogworks ones. So I don't actually have any cards in the list that boost, which is like a conscious decision. So the Proto ones are basically equivalent to the Cogworks ones in this list. but they, even though those don't actually do anything, and these ones block for 1, you can still argue that the Teklo base equipment is worse, because they have Blade Break and there are effects in the game that can force you to block, like T-Bone or Meganetic Shockwave. So if you're forced to block with your base Evo and it Blade Breaks, that can set you back quite a lot, because you won't be able to establish your Evo in that slot, which can really like hamper your entire game plan. You're not totally dead in the water because you can play the Fabricate, the first mode on it, equip a base proto from your inventory, so you can rebuild Evo into that slot even if one of these gets blown up. So it's not the end of the world, but you can still make a good argument that this should just be like the Cogworks equipment, so that can't happen to you. Because the upside of the 1 armor on the Teklo base, like you never want to block with it and let it Blade Break, but you can block with it, use the hero power and play an Evo over it at instant speed, so then the Blade Break doesn't happen and you effectively gain 1 life from your base equipment. So I think that's worth it at the moment. The occasional use of that is worth having the situation where your opponent like T-bones you turn 1 and you break one of your equipment slots, but that's a bit debatable. It's not really that interesting of a decision. Like, it's either whichever one you think is more likely to happen. And then for the weapon, I have the Teklo Leveler. So over this weekend at Worlds, actually, there was a Teklo player on stream who was 2-0, and I think he might have won the match on stream as well. I don't exactly remember, but in that match he had the pistol as his weapon, the plasma pistol, rather than the Teklo Leveler. I think that's like a reasonable choice. I don't know if he'd had that for every matchup or just the matchup he happened to be playing on stream. I think the ceiling on this getting to 3 power is really good. I think that's makes it worth using, especially when you're playing in every matchup with this build of the deck, is to get 4 Evos in play anyway. 1 mana 3 power go again attack in your weapon slot is really solid. And it helps you turn the corner once you have your Evo set up and your transition into like the mid and late game. It's really efficient. So yeah, the Teklo Leveler I think is the best choice. Probably either the Teklo Leveler or the pistol. I don't think there's any other mechanologist weapon that would be worth considering. Onto the rest of the list. So in Flesh and Blood, of course, you have the way your deck is built. You don't really have a sideboard, so to speak, like you do in Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! You just have your 80 card list, and then you just take cards out for game 1, because the matches are best of 1. So depending on the list, it can be a lot like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic style deck, where you have your like ideal 60 cards, and then you have a few like situational things available, or your deck can be like very, very malleable and you're like slightly modifying your strategy on a bit more of like a continuous spectrum for different matchups. I think this type of deck is much more of that former type, where you have your like the 60 cards that you sort of want to be using, and then you have like some specific tech options in your quote unquote sideboard for matchups that are more challenging. So I'll go through all the cards quickly just so you have the like context for what the list looks like, and then I'll talk about them individually. So I have all 12 of the Sentry Evos, the Sentry based red Evos, 3 Fabricate, 3 Fate Foreseen, 3 red Firewall, 3 red Sigil, 1 Singularity, 3 red Sync, 3 Terminator Tank, 3 War Machine, 3 Pulsewave Protocol, 3 Tome of Fyendal, all 12 of the Steel Soul blue Evos, 2 Meganetic Protocol, 3 Scrap Compactor blue, 3 Steel Street Enforcement, and then into the sideboard we have 3 Oasis Respite red, 3 red Snatch, 3 Rusted Relic, 4 of the Proto equipments, 1 Visiatronic head equipment, and then just randomly one Dissolving Shield. And then in the maybe pile, which I might talk about later, these are just cards that I've like had in the deck at some point, or I've considered playing, but I'm not at the moment. So back to the list. As you can see, this deck is like super defensive. So you have Fate Foreseen, Sink Below, Sigil, which is like a set of cards that all defensive decks basically play in this game. Like even some more mid-rangey decks that aren't super defensive will play Sink Below just because it's such an efficient card. But not only do we have the Sink, Sigil, Fate Foreseen trio, we also have 4 red Firewall, which just blocks 4. We have the 4 Steel Street Enforcement, which hopefully blocks 5 once you have all your Evos set up. Fabricate 2 is basically just a card that blocks. I'll talk about that in a second, or it helps you to block even though it has no block itself. The Evo Sentries are just, not only just the Evo Sentries, but all the Evos are basically cards that primarily help you to block. Like with the Temper and the Battle Worn, each Steel Soul Evo is worth basically 5 health. Each base Evo is worth 3 health. Because you block once, it gets a minus counter, you block with it again. Same deal with the blue ones. So many cards in the list are defense and life gain, essentially. Your goal is to survive until you have all the Evos set up. Then once you have your Evo set up, your gun starts becoming like an efficient attack. 1 mana for 3 damage worth of attack is your opponent's gonna have to respect that, especially in combination with these massive attacks like Terminator Tank War Machine. Once you have 4 Evos, this is 3 mana 9 power attack. When your opponent gets hit by it, they lose a card, which is huge. Like 1 or 2 of these means that your opponent's going to be at such a low life total that they really have to start respecting your gun, the Teklo leveler. And then once it gets to that point, they're like losing a card every turn. Meanwhile, you have like super efficient block. You're basically like fatiguing them out or just outright killing them. So the hard part is getting to that point without dying, but that's really the strategy. So once you understand the strategy, like the rest of the list doesn't need much explaining, and there's not even really that many other cards to talk about, right? So like you play these combination of blue and red Evos rather than the yellow ones, so like the Zoom Call and stuff, so you can keep flipping back and forth between them. The other Evos aren't base Evos, so if you play the other set of Evos, once you like equip Teklo with one of those, like that's it. You can't play any further Evos on top of it anymore. So that's like life gain you would be missing out on, or you have to build your deck differently so you have much fewer Evos, so you don't have the issue of them clashing, but then your Terminator tanks and your Teklo leveler becomes much harder to get online with the all 4 Evos, and your Fabricate becomes worse. So if you want to play a deck that has a ton of Evos, because you want your tank and your Fabricate and your leveler to be good, you basically have to do it this way with the Steel Soul and the Sentry ones. So that's what I have. Generally the best one is the head, because the intellect buff off this is really nice. Like in the mid game, extra cards in Flesh and Blood are so amazing because they're not easy to come by. So the Steel Soul memory effect is usually the best one. The other ones can be decent, especially the Steel Soul processor, the chest, because you can play it off the hero power, so as an instant, so you don't lose your action point, and then you get 3 mana back off it. Then you can either play another Evo or play your Terminator tank from it. So just things like that you got to be aware of. Similar thing with the Steel Soul Tower, just trying to set it up so you make use of the free action point. And then in really, really grindy games, your Steel Soul Controller being able to get back extra copies of your attacks is pretty nice as well, but that's probably the least interesting one. The other thing I want to talk about while I'm talking about these Evos is this specialization card, the Singularity. So what this does, you transform your hero, your weapon, and all of your equipment into this guy. So you pay 3 mana and you exile 2 cards from it to attack. When it attacks, your opponent discards a card. That's great. This counts as having 4 Evos, so your Terminator tanks still have all their buffs, your enforcement still blocks for 5. And this has Battle Worn, so like this slowly ticks down, so you effectively have extra. When you flip into this, you effectively gain 6 plus 5 plus 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 health, which is 11, 15 plus 3 is 18 plus 2 is 20 plus 1, 21. So you gain 21 health essentially when you flip into this, assuming you can use all of this. I mean, the downside is your intellect goes down to 3, which is obviously bad. But usually when you flip into this guy, unless your opponent can suddenly fatigue you, because remember you lose your gun when you do this, and you can only attack until you run out of soul. But this guy's really not easy to block. 6 power every turn, assuming you can pitch into it, and your opponent has to discard a card before they block, so it's pretty tough to deal with. It's definitely not something you do every game, but your opponent really has to respect it, which is partly why we're not playing boost cards, because you lose a big strategic or tactical angle if you accidentally boost over this, because you have no way to get it back. But the other thing is that like a lot of the boost cards are very aggressive, like 0 to 60 and things like that, which are not very synergistic with the overall plan that you're trying to do. So even though if you do randomly hit a Evo off a boost, it's pretty good, right? You're like effectively drawing a free card. It's not reliable, and it's also like the thing that enables it is not really a thing that your deck is trying to be doing. So yeah, that's why I'm not on the boost plan. And yeah, you don't have to play this every game. You pitch it away a lot, but it is a very strong angle to be able to have in the late game. Once you've used up all your Terminator attacks and stuff, you only have your gun as pressure. So setting up a situation where you can turn into this, and the way Flesh and Blood works is you roughly know when it's going to be coming up. It's a really strong card. So the thing about knowing when it's going to be coming up is that you want to be conscious of what Evos you have online when you're about to flip into this, because the blue Evos get their effects twice if you have them on top of your Evo stack when you play the Singularity. This is especially important for the blue one and for the chest one and the legs one. So when you flip into Teklo, the Necropotent, if you have the chest blue Evo and the legs blue Evo face up, you get 6 mana and 2 action points, which give you 2 attacks straight away, which is like really, really important. Like you can also put 2 Terminator tags back in your deck with this, and you gain 2 int if you have the head and the arms one, but that's way less important. So if you're getting into like the late game stage where you're aiming to turn into the Teklo, try if you can to have the chest and the legs blue on top rather than the red ones. I mean, of course, sometimes that's going to be unavoidable and you're not really going to have a choice, but it's just something to be aware of. Then in terms of the attacks, we have the Terminator tank, the War Machine. There's another card in this cycle, I think it's called Annihilator Engine, but that one is much worse. That one has the effect, when it hits the opponent, you destroy either one thing or everything that is blocking it. That's just much less strong because it has much less chance of taking an actual relevant card away from the opponent. Like they might be blocking with a thing like the equipment that's going to die anyway. And you don't really want to have too many reds in the deck. Like you have these 4-cost Evos that you're trying to play, so you need to be maxing blues and yellows. So the Annihilator engine I don't think is worth playing. I do have, this is kind of like the third attack, so you can think of this as like the replacement Annihilator engine, this Pulse Wave Protocol. So what this does, when it attacks, they reveal X cards from their hand, where X is how many Evos you have. Then your opponent has to block with a card of your choice that has defense less than X. So notably this is less than X, not less than or equal to X. So if your opponent's deck has a lot of block 3s, then if you play this on 3 Evos, it's likely to not do anything, because your opponent has to reveal only 3 cards, and if all of them has block 3, they don't have to block with any of them. So usually you want to save this until you have 4 Evos. But once you get to that point, it's actually very good. So compared to like Terminator Tank, for example, it's also going to cost 3, because it just costs 3 always. It also has, Terminator Tank has 9 power off 4 Evos, whereas Pulse Wave Protocol only has 6. And when this hits your opponent, they outright just discard a card, whereas with this card, they're not discarding it, they're blocking with it, so your opponent's effectively gaining life off that too. So like not only does this have only 6 power rather than 9, the card your opponent's losing from it is turning into a blocker rather than just discarding it. But you do get to effectively choose which card they discard from it, which is really strong, much stronger than Terminator Attack, and this is a yellow rather than a red, so it helps a lot with casting stuff in the mid game. So yeah, like even though Terminator Tank is like the marquee card for this deck, as like a 3-cost 9 attack, when it hits they discard a card, which is like a nuts. Pulse Wave Protocol is actually really strong too. It just doesn't really look like it because it does so much less damage. But once you're in that like mid to late game situation, you just want to pressure your opponent in a way that doesn't let them attack you back for a ton of damage. So in that sense, Pulse Wave Protocol is just as good as War Machine or Terminator Tank. It's just the like raw damage output of it is slightly lower. In terms of more of the defensive stuff, like it's all very straightforward, like the Sigil and the Fateful Scene and everything. Like it's, even this card is just a thing that blocks. The one thing that does need a bit of explaining is the Fabricate. So this card is really strong. Usually the mode that you play it on is banish Evo from hand, and your Evos get +1 defense this turn. So effectively when you banish an Evo from your hand, draw a card, that is basically like just saying draw a card. Because you can play that Evo from your banish zone later in the game with your heroes effect. And then gaining your Evo permanents gaining +1 defense this turn. If you have 4 Evos, like that's 4 extra block, right? Which means that this card is basically like 0 cost, draw a card, you gain 4 block, which is really good, right? That's like Firewall, draw a card. And then it even has these other modes, like equip Proto base from your inventory. Like if you couldn't do that, there would be games that you would just outright lose to having your Evo destroyed somehow. It's definitely very clutch to be able to do that. I think that's like a very clever design for the LSS to put on the card, because the hero would be so much more fragile without it. And then putting this under an Evo permanent you control, I mean that doesn't actually really do anything. It's just what the mode that you choose if none of the other modes are relevant. Like if you're playing this in your own turn for some reason, then like giving your Evo permanents +1 don't do anything, and if you're none of your Evos have died, then you can't equip a thing from your inventory. So you just put it under your Evo, and then you have one more soul later in the game if you ever flip into the Necropotent hero. But yeah, the strongest thing about it is being able to block for a ton extra and drawing a card. That's super efficient exchange. Like straightforwardly, if you have these red Evos, then it's just like effectively one extra defense for each one. But if you have the blue Evos, it can be more than that. Because the thing with these is that because they have Battle Worn, they have Temper rather than Battle Worn, usually you only want to block with them twice, right? Like it has 3 block, you block with it once, and now it has 2 defense. Now when it has 2 defense, you block with it a second time, then it goes down to 1 defense. So it's effectively blocked for 5 and it has 1 defense left. You don't actually want to use that last defense usually, because then it will break, which is very bad. But that 1 defense gets buffed up, that 1 defense is there, and it gets buffed up by the Fabricate. And then because that +1 lasts past the time that the temper trigger happens, so your Evo still survives if you do that. So you basically went from an Evo that had 1 defense that you're never planning on using, so effectively 0 defense, and that turn that you fabricated, it effectively had 2 defense. So it's often the case if you have blue Evos that have 2 temper counters on them and you fabricate, you're gaining 2 defense for each Evo rather than just 1. So that's a really nice thing to keep track of as well. Like in the fabricate turns, you really want to make sure that you're spreading your blocks around properly so that you're maximizing your damage you're absorbing. I think I've talked about almost every card in the deck. So the Tome of Fyendal, of course, the way that this card is balanced in Flesh and Blood is that it costs you your action in the turn that you play it. So even though you might be playing it from your arsenal and gaining life, which is the thing that this deck really wants to do because you're defensive, you're trying to gain life and survive. It's not a good thing if you're wasting your whole turn on that usually. But of course the way that this guy works is that you have the hero power, you can draw up extra cards, then activate this, and then play Evo either from your hand or from your banish zone as an instant. So that bypasses the fact that you used your action point on this. Overall, I think that's worth it. Like it fits in with the defensive plan of what the deck is doing. And there's even like occasions where you have a 5-card hand in your tome turn. I mean, it's not easy to do because I don't know what kind of turn your opponent would have to have for you to like activate your Steel Soul and for them you not needing to block. But I mean, sometimes you can, because you can block out with all your Evos to hamper your opponent's turn. Then you keep all 5 cards from your Steel Soul memory trigger. Then in your turn you tome and then you gain a bunch of life. So that's nice. Yeah, I do think this is like the good card for the deck. And then the last few cards. 1 Scrap Compactor. Well, I mean, we've got 3. 1 color of Scrap Compactor. This card probably looks like very weak. 1 power attacks don't really do anything in this game. Most of the time your opponent can just ignore them. The main reason why this card is here is because it's blue, it blocks 3, and basically helps you like fish Evo out of your graveyard to play it for later. Like, if you think about it as a sort of like blue block 3 snatch that is like unblockable, but it always draws an Evo that you can like arsenal forever, or like some weird thing like that. Like, it doesn't sound too bad when you put it that way. And the fact that it costs 0 means it's just so easy and flexible to use. Like, there are other scrap cards or scrap attacks even that are also blue block 3s. But costing 0 is a bigger upside than attacking for more power, because you don't usually really care about attacking in that way. Just being free is really nice, because then it lets you play the Evo that you got off at that turn a lot of the time. Yeah, it's just like late in the game you might have blocked with your Evos a few times, from hand I mean, so there's some in the graveyard, and this helps you set up either more defense or one of the triggers for a good situation, or like getting ready to flip your Necropotence. It's just a nice all-arounder card. Like I said, it's really, really important that this deck plays a ton of blues, because playing the full cost Evos is otherwise quite hard. And this is just the one that has like the most consistency with everything else that you're doing. And then the last two cards in the deck, I've got 2 Meganetic Protocol, the blue. This one is the biggest flex slot in the deck. Like, I'm pretty sure it should be blues after playing the deck a bunch. Like, it just helps you so much in the early and mid game to have more resources available to cast things. But I don't know if this is the right blue to be playing. Like, it has a very polarizing effect where it's either like really strong or it doesn't really do much at all. So the defending hero must defend with X equipment that has -1 counters, where X is the number of Evos you have equipped. So in terms of in the wider meta, the equipment that has temper isn't super common. Like Flamescale Furnace is like a really big one. There might be more that I'm not thinking of, but there generally aren't that many. And the thing is that if once your opponent knows that you have this, they're probably going to play around it, because like the way that this deck works generally is that you don't really like trade damage over the course of a game. You don't really have like little on hits where blocking with equipment is good to stop it. Like you have these like enormous chunky on hits that are like almost impossible to block anyway. Like your opponent's not really gonna save 2 damage by putting a Flamescale Furnace in front of this. Like it doesn't really help your opponent win the game. So because of that, if your opponent knows that you have this or they guesses that you have it, they're just like not gonna block with the Flamescale Furnace when you like Teklo level them on turn 5 or so or something. And then once they're not blocking with their temper equipment, their equipment's not getting minus counters, and then this doesn't do anything. Yeah, if it was just any equipment, like you'd snipe their tunics or whatever with it, then the card would be insane, but it would probably be too good at that point. The situation obviously where it's really nuts is the mirror, which you probably don't have to worry about too much, considering this is arguably the worst character in the game. But obviously if you have the like blue Evos sitting on 2 counters and you force them to block and lose it, that's like a huge swing in terms of win percentage. So it might be worth it just for that. I'm not exactly sure, but I don't really know what other blue you're supposed to use. There's some in the like maybe row down here which you could maybe swap for it, but I think this is fine. Like some of the dash decks are playing Evos too now, just to have different options, so this card might be alright. It's pretty marginal either way, I think. I don't think there's any blues that have 6 power so that you can like pop Phantasm with it, which is another option. There might be some generic blue that has 6 power, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that card would have like 2 block rather than 3, which is a relevant drawback as well. So That's a problem. So yeah, that's all the main deck. I mean, it's a really, really simple game plan to follow. Like you basically try and do the same thing every game. Like early game, you're trying to get your Evos up, so you can start using your Teklo leveler for maximum value. So your Fabricates actually give you a lot of defense when you use them, so that your Terminator tanks and War Machines become online, and then you just block, attack, block, attack. Other decks don't really have access to effects that are this strong, so yeah, you're just trying to survive to the point where you can start using these, is basically the summary of the overall game plan. Then onto the sort of sideboard. Like I said, ideal case you use these 60 cards versus everything. Like this is the most consistent game plan to follow. So how are you deviating from that with your sideboard? So the proto equipments, that's for the Fabricate in case your Evos blow up. It's not a card you're boarding in, so you don't have to think about that. Rusted Relic is in the deck just to have Arcane Barrier. Most decks in Flesh and Blood, when they want Arcane Barrier, they put it in their equipment slot. They play like the Lantern or the Null Rune boots or whatever to give themselves Arcane Barrier from turn 0. You can't do that in this deck really, because you need all your equipment slots to be base equipments for your Evos. So you have to like work around that a bit by playing the Rusted Relics. It's nice that these are blues for sure. It would suck a lot more if they weren't. And I think this is sort of fine. Like I don't know how many you would play versus like Runeblade, because you don't need to have more than one to play versus that. But versus Icelander and Kano, I definitely think you want all three of these. And then definitely versus Kano and maybe versus Icelander as well, you can also use this. It's your Mechanologist head equipment that has Arcane Barrier 2, which is quite nice. Definitely versus Kano, it's important to have the Arcane Barrier available as soon as you can find it. So yeah, this is good. And then it also has the ability that can blow itself up, and it doesn't do anything when it blows itself up because your deck doesn't boost, but once you blow itself up, then you can use the Fabricate to play the Proto Head from your inventory. So then you can start establishing your Evos at a point in the game once you're already safe from Arcane because you've found some Rusted Relics. That's the idea behind that anyway, but it's probably still a bit challenging to beat the Arcane damage decks. Then on the sideboard, I also have the Snatch. So one issue that this deck has is that like you have a very weird like bimodal distribution in terms of what your attacks do. Like you either have Teklo Leveler, which hits for at most 3, or you have these like enormous red attacks that hit for like 9. So the problem with that is that when you play against illusions, if you want to kill like a mid-size illusion that has 4 health, you don't really have any good way of doing that. Like pitching into a 3-cost attack to kill like a mirror guy is like a very bad trade. Basically, like you don't want to be spending your turn on doing that, but it has too much health for your Teklo Leveler to kill it. So if this is the problem that you have, then why not play like a 4 power attack with like an insane on hit effect that's always going to connect versus a dragon anyway. So basically that's the idea behind the Snatch. Before Snatch I was playing the red 0 to 60 as the same idea, but then I realized that the guaranteed card draw is better than the go again from the 0 to 60, so that's what Snatch is for. And then Oasis Respite might not be totally necessary, I'm not sure, but there are matchups where the fatigue plan that you can do is super reliable. You just defend and you Teklo Leveler them or wait for them to fatigue, in those situations you can just play this like the normal 60, but you bought out the War Machine for the Oasis. So I've done this versus like Dash IO, things like this, because it blocks the damage from stuff like Boom Grenade, and versus these Mechanologist decks like Max and Dash, especially Dash IO, like all you have to do is survive because they boost their entire deck away into the banish zone just by playing the game. And then once you've survived their entire stack of cards, then they can't do anything. They have no deck left, and you just ping them out with a leveler. You don't need to have the big corner turn with the 6 power attacks. And War Machine is less consistent value than the tank because your opponent's always going to have a hand, they're not always going to have an arsenal. So you can just board out this like red that isn't that good for like another really strong defensive option. So that's basically that idea. And then I put this in as like a 4th weird rusted relic, but I have no idea if that's correct or not. So yeah, that's the entire list for this Teklovossen. Much higher win rate than the average Teklovossen. I don't know if that means it's actually good or not, but never mind. I'll talk about these maybe cards. So Energy Potion I thought was good for a while. The nice thing about Energy Potion is that on the big turns where you're playing these, having the extra resources saved up is really nice. So the free mana you get off the chest blue Evo is only worth it if you have the action point still, which means that you need to play it off the Teklo hero power. And if you pitch your hand firstly into the 3 mana for the hero power, and then you pitch 4 mana into playing your Steel Soul processor, there's a good chance that when you do that you don't have any cards left, so you have nothing to spend the 3 mana on. Of course you're going to draw a card from the hero power, so if you draw something good you can use the 3 mana on that, which is why like pitch stacking with this hero is a bit critical, because if you know you have a big attack coming, then you can make that play and do it. But otherwise, like you need you can use the extra mana from the Energy Potion, so that rather than pitch your whole hand to play the Steel Soul processor, you have some card left over that you can cast from the free 3 mana. And it's the same thing with the leg, right? Like if you pitch all your mana into playing the leg, then you get a free action point, but you might not have any spell left to any card left to play with that action point. You just don't have that many resources all in one turn. So being able to set aside some resources for the turn with Energy Potion is not bad, but finding a window to play the Energy Potion is not always the easiest, and the fact that it doesn't block is a big liability a lot of the time too. So for those reasons I'm not playing Energy Potion anymore. This basically got cut for the Meganetic Protocol slot. And then Scrap Trader, I played 3 of this for a long time. I thought it was very good that you could effectively get 2 cards banked up in your banish zone off it. So 0 cost, you scrap 2 things, you get 2 mana for each thing that you scrap. So this gains you 4 mana when you play it, assuming you scrap 2 Evos. Then you spend 3 of that mana to activate your hero power, so you have 1 mana left. Then you pitch a blue to play a blue Evo, or you pitch a red to play a red Evo. And then you draw a card off the hero power. So that's not that bad of a turn in itself. And then you will have 1 more Evo left over in your banish zone to play for later. The problem is that like very early in the game you're not going to have those Evos in your banish zone to actually use with this. It only comes online until like much later. And early game, if you're not playing this card, that means you're either blocking or pitching it. And the fact that this is a red that only blocks for 2 means that it's very bad in both of those scenarios. So this card is maybe not as good as it might seem. Basically, this is what got cut for the blue scrap compactor. It's having something that does scrap is good. Like, it lets you have a decent bit of recursion in case you had forced to trade off some of your Evos from hand early in the game. But I think Scrap Trader might be the wrong option for that. It might be okay to just play 1, because like you maximize the recursion value, but you minimize the chance of it bricking your hand early. So you could play like 3 Scrap Compactor and you cut like 1 of the Meganetic Protocol for 1 of the Scrap Trader. That might be okay. And then in terms of these were just more options as like blues that kind of do stuff. So if you want more scrap rather than these Meganetic Protocols, like that's probably the closest choice, to be honest. Meganetic Protocol here or the blue Junkyard Dog. It's just more scrap. Attacking for 5 is not bad. Like having some attacks, extra attacks is okay because it helps you deal with that mirror guy problem that I was explaining before. Liquid Cool Mayhem is like a similar type of card in that vein, but I think the value from scrap is better than being able to play this for free. This card's not bad though. And then the red Junkyard Dog, like it's another popper, which is quite nice. And because it has 6 power, you can loop it back with the Steel Soul arms. So in a way that gives you like a much more of a recursion engine, right? Because you can, once you've found this, like you play this, you scrap your Evo from your graveyard, then if you want to do more scrapping, you can get this red Junkyard Dog back with your Evo arm trigger and scrap again. But like the way games play out are not that grindy. Like it's a cute idea to think about, but I don't think it actually makes sense. So yeah, so basically that's the best thing I can kind of come up with. Maybe one of these can maybe be a Scrap Trader, or like both of them could be blue Junkyard Dog. That's really the best idea I can think of how to improve the deck. Everything else, like there's not really many other alterations you could make. Like you got to play the certain number of Evos. These are the only Evos that really function for how the deck wants to play. You have all the like good defense cards. It's not really any more defense cards you could play. You have all the good attacks that you can play. Like it just sort of once you've identified that you want to play this kind of like very tanky, slow, multiple Evo plan, like the rest of the deck sort of builds itself, I think. It'll be really interesting to see the list that the guy played at Worlds. I don't know if that's been posted anywhere, but I'll have to have a look around for it. But yeah, I really, really like Flesh and Blood as a game. I think it's really cool that it's come out of New Zealand. Of course, that's where I'm from. Hooray, New Zealand, yeah. I do know some of the people that make the game, like the James White, who's the CEO of Flesh and Blood, or of Legend Story Studios, whatever. Like he's the face of the game, right? He used to be the tournament organizer in Auckland for Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh! At various points in time as well. So he's definitely had a lot of experience with card games. He was a very good Magic player as well. Yeah, I don't have anything bad to say about him at all. Like I think he's probably got a pretty good company and knows what he's doing. I know other people working there as well. People I know from living in Auckland, like really good Magic players, Yu-Gi-Oh players on the design and development team there. So yeah, the game's really fun. It seems pretty well balanced. I have a lot of faith going forward that it's going to turn out to be like a really solid, enduring option alongside those other more famous established games like Pokemon, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, whatever. Yeah, I've had a lot of fun this week playing these games online. So the other nice thing about this thing is you have like a AI button here as well, which I mean, it's really easy to beat it, right? Especially with the stock decks that the AI has. I don't think the AI is that good that you could put your own deck for the AI to use and it would be able to like competently figure that out. I haven't tried that yet. Maybe I don't even know if it's possible. But apart from these games versus the AI, a few games versus the AI to just make sure I understand how everything works, and then playing with this deck on Talishar, this is literally my entire experience of playing Fish and Blood in these bar charts, apart from like a month of playing with the like Benji precon deck from Outsiders. So yeah, definitely much less experience with Fish and Blood than Magic or other games, but I think it's a super cool game. And I might do some more videos on Fish and Blood going forward. So I think it's getting close to my bedtime. I'll leave it there. This has been Li-Fi TCG signing out.